Hey y'all, this is Melissa with Mesquite Field Farm, and today we're going to be talking about soap making, especially as an added value product on your farm. And we started making soap primarily because I was having some skin issues and really concerned about what was in my soap and the products that were being used and having control over that. So we started making soap and found that it was actually a lot easier than we thought it was going to be, and just kind of went from there. And so we're going to go through a lot of information today. And one of the things, it's just like everything else I learned how to do. I think it's real simple when I start, but then as I get into it, I realize, oh my God, there's way more to this than I thought. So we're going to deep dive on some things, but then some of it's just going to be high level, just to get you in there doing it. And that's one of the great things about soap making is when you're starting out, it can be super affordable. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to go out and spend thousands of dollars on equipment. You can just start out real basic and decide if you like it or not. And if you do, well, then you can upgrade. And if you don't, you haven't wasted a lot of money trying something new. So also, just to let you know, Doug is actually here with me. He is behind the camera, and he might randomly pop in and ask me some questions. It's not God or Oz, it's just Doug making sure I'm addressing everything that we want to make sure we cover in this video. So without further ado, let's get started.
Ooh, pick me, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So why would someone want to make soap?
Well, so for us especially, we started making this soap for us and found that it worked really well for our skin. And since, people are gonna buy soap, ideally. And anyway, so we thought, well, if we're gonna make this product for ourselves and it works really well, we can actually sell the extra. So it's something that we're already making for ourselves, but then can also sell the extra to make some revenue on our farm. So it's an added value product. And what's really cool is we'll go into this a little bit later, is once you get started into soap making, the possibilities are endless. In the springtime, you can be harvesting lavender buds or whatnot. You can put that in your soap, or flowers, and you can add that to your soap and really change up your recipes and come up with this great additional revenue product that you created.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so first what I want to do is kind of discuss the layout of the class and the videos that you're going to be watching, and then we're going to talk about links and handouts and stuff that we're going to provide for you, okay? So this is going to be done in 4 videos. The first video is this introduction and the discussion that we're going to have about soap and how to make soap, and also molds, which is a separate section, but it's going to still be in this video. In video number 2, we're actually going to make the soap, unmold it, and cut it. Video 3 is going to be packaging, curing, testing for saponification, and then packaging. And then in the 4th video is marketing, so marketing your product to your customers, okay? The handouts and links that we're going to be including with these videos are the characteristics of fats and oils, so you can look through that list and kind of see, how do I want my soap to turn out? What kind of oils do I want to be using in my recipe? Excuse me. We're going to include our recipe, and there's a reason for that. When you're first starting out making soap, because there's so much information out there and so many ways to do things and possibly hurt yourself, I suggest, or we suggest, that you start off with a recipe that's already been proven so that you're not having to calculate lye solutions and that sort of thing. Just start with a recipe, and then if you really like what you're doing, then you can start branching out, learning more, and modifying your recipes. And then we're also going to include a link to a soap calculator, which we'll get into later on in the discussion, okay? So without further ado, let's get in it. So first thing I want to tell you is that soap, at its very basic level, is 3 things. It's fats, it's sodium hydroxide or lye, and water. That's it. Easy peasy, right? Well, it is, but it isn't. So this is caustic soda. It can be very toxic to us. What happens is the sodium hydroxide reacts with the fatty acids in whichever fats you're using in a process called saponification. It's a chemical reaction. I'm not going to nerd out on it right now, but it's a chemical reaction that happens between the sodium hydroxide and the fats, the fatty acids, is what creates your soap. So yes, this is toxic, but through the process of saponification, it becomes non-toxic. It becomes soap, okay? So this is the basics for soap. It's really easy, and yet it ends up being really difficult somehow. So there are 3 different ways that you can make soap. We're not going to deep dive into all of them. There's a glycerin kind of melt and pour, which is you get a big chunk of glycerin soap that's already made. It's already been saponified and all that stuff. You just melt it. You can add scents and put it into cute little molds and stuff like that. So that's called the melt and pour method. Then there's hot process and cold process. We're going to be doing cold process, and this has to do with the temperature of the ingredients as you're saponifying it, okay? For cold process, they're going to be a lower temperature as you're working them together and trying to get to trace. We'll get there. For hot process, you're keeping your ingredients at a higher temperatures. Generally, most people do it in a crock pot so that it gets through the saponification process faster. So technically, you don't have to let it cure as long, but we don't do that method. We actually do cold process. So that's what we're going to show you in these videos. If you want to learn about the other ones, obviously more than welcome to. There are plenty of videos out there where you can learn to do that, okay? But we're going to do cold process. That's what you're going to see here. And yeah, that's it. So let's move on. Any questions from the peanut gallery over there?
No questions.
Not yet. Okay. So what we're going to talk about next is the ingredients. And I showed you the 3 basic ingredients. The other things that you can add to your soaps are colorants. And that's a whole other can of worms. I don't actually have any colorants. I don't use them in my soap. I like the soaps to be natural colors, but if you want to add that, go right ahead. And then scents. You can essential oils, or you can buy fragrance oils. Just be cautious when you're purchasing some of those and make sure that there's not stuff in there that you don't want in your final product. Generally speaking, we stick to essential oils. But that's entirely up to you. And then of course, like I said earlier, you can add lavender buds or chamomile flowers, and they can add attractiveness to your product, and in some cases, exfoliation factors, right? You could add clay in there, you can do charcoal. I mean, really, the possibilities are endless. So we're gonna keep it basic though, and just have our fats, our lye, and then our scent for our particular recipe. Tools and equipment. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. We're going to go through your tools and equipment, finish this part of the conversation, and then I'm going to go into talking more about the process of soap making with your fats and those sorts of things. So let's get through equipment next. It's not super complicated. You don't need a ton of stuff, and it doesn't have to be fancy. So the first thing you're going to need is containers to mix your soap in. You definitely want to have at least 2. You need one for making your lye solution, and then you need one for mixing your fats together, because you have to keep these separate until you're ready to mix them together to make your soap, okay? So just make sure you have plenty of containers. Some people strongly believe in using glass containers. I'm not so sure about that because the mixture can get really hot, and I don't want it to risk breaking that glass. So I would just use plastic buckets. And then, a thermometer to check the temperature of your ingredients as you're working with them. This is an instant read thermometer. I really want, it's on my wish list, a digital infrared thermometer, but this will work just fine too. But you want something that's going to show you the temperature really quickly, okay?
Who makes that one? Who's it made? Does it say?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't say.
No problem.
What else we got here? Oh, safety equipment. Because you're working with lye, which is a toxic solution, it will off gas, okay? You wanna make sure you have masks and eye protection and gloves, which unfortunately I don't have here. You can use dish gloves, or you can just use the nitrile gloves, will be sufficient. Okay, you're also going to need a scale, very important, because you have to be very precise in measuring your ingredients for the soap, and we'll go into why later. Whisk, spatula, super helpful when you're mixing up your ingredients. You could use spoons. What else? Oh, this guy. An Immersion Blender. Very helpful. especially because when you're trying to get the soap to saponify, if you're stirring it by hand, you're going to be there for a while. This helps speed up the process. And this one is strictly for soap making. I don't use it for anything else. This is all it does. And then, of course, molds. We're going to get into a deeper discussion about molds in a bit, but not kidding when I talk about it can be budget friendly to start soap making. This is what we use as our molds the first few times that we started making soap. So we didn't spend a bunch of money on molds. We literally just used creamer cartons, and then recently have added this wooden mold to our repertoire. So super excited about that, and we'll get into a deeper conversation later. Okay, so let's talk about the actual process of soap making and what's happening there. Again, I'm not going to go into too terribly much detail, but essentially soap making involves reacting fats and fatty acids with a hydroxide base, which is your sodium hydroxide, right? And it's basically forming a salt, essentially, believe it or not. The fat molecules are made up of glycerin, and they chemically react with the, they're attached to fatty acids. I try not to get crazy about this. And each oil has different fatty acid chains. So each oil is going to react differently with the sodium hydroxide to create different characteristics in your soap, right? So essentially, when you're trying to decide which oils you want to use in your recipe, it can be broken down. We will provide a list of some most commonly used oils and their kind of characteristics, but if you really want to get into soap making, all you have to do is understand where your fats fall on a certain scale, right? So you have saturated fats, and then you have unsaturated fats, right? And each of those provide different characteristics, okay? So saturated fats, back up a second. Those characteristics include hardness of your soap, how effective it is at cleaning, and how well it lathers. Those are the primary characteristics, okay? So with saturated fats, they will accelerate trace, so you'll get to that stopping point a lot faster. They make a harder soap. I'm gonna pull my notes over here just to make sure I don't misinform anybody. So they make a harder soap. They're more effective at cleansing. However, they can strip away more of your natural oils from your skin, but their lather is creamy and more stable, okay? Unsaturated fats are slower to trace, so it's going to take you a lot longer stirring it, trying to get it to that point where you want to get it into the mold. It tends to create a softer soap. It's less efficient at cleaning, but it's gentler on the skin, right? And it has more of a fluffy lather to it. So, and my peanut gallery has a question, hang on. So when you're starting to kind of get off into making your own recipes, these are the characteristics that you want to keep in mind, right? So what kind of soap you're trying to make is going to determine which oil you're going to determine which kind of oils you're going to use. And so when you're making it, for example, for our recipe, we're using a combination of olive oil, coconut oil, and shea butter. So each of those provide different characteristics, they're saturated fats and unsaturated fats in the recipe to kind of give us what we're after in our final soap. Okay, so some things to think about when you're doing that. Within each of those categories of saturated fats and unsaturated fats, there's 4 levels, there's 4 different acids, right? And each one of those provides additional properties, right? So like I said, you can really get down a rabbit hole with this. I'm just trying to point out that you can go online and look up lists of characteristics of certain oils, or if you understand the basics of saturated fats and unsaturated fats, you can really make a determination for yourself about what you want to be putting into your soap, okay? Yes, peanut gallery.
What is trace?
So trace is a point in the process of saponification that you want to get into before you mold your soap. And we're going to show that in the video when we actually make the soap. It's basically a point in the process of saponification where it's an indicator, right? So it's an indicator that you're where you need to be in order to start molding your product, okay? So in a nutshell, when you're making soap, you're going to get your oils to a certain temperature. You're going to make your lye solution, which is your mixture of lye and water, and you're going to get them to a close temperature range. You're going to combine them, and you're going to stir them together until they reach trace, and then you're going to mold it, and you're going to leave it for 12 to 24 hours. Then you unmold it, cut it, and let it cure for 6 weeks. That's the basic process in a nutshell.
Gotcha.
So I'm not going to go into all of the individual saturated and unsaturated fats and stuff like that. Like I said, we're going to provide a list of the characteristics of certain oils and how they react in soap. For a couple of safety things, I want to make sure that I get this covered. As I said, this is caustic to humans. But what happens during that saponification process is not that it becomes inert, but it becomes a completely different chemical compound, is what makes soap. But when you're making soap, please make sure that you are very accurate on your lye measurement. You can have more oil and it's fine, but if you have, I'm going to see if I can explain this right. So you have, let's just say you have this much oil in your recipe. You cannot have more lye than oil in your recipe, because if you do, it doesn't have enough fat to react with, and your soap will remain caustic. Okay? So you have to make sure you've got more fat.
Then you have
your lye solution in there, right? Because if you don't,
because you don't want to peel the skin off your body.
I mean, precisely. And so there's a couple ways to do that, and I'll use the technical terms for it. One is called super fatting, and you can pick an additional oil where you put an extra percentage of that fat in your recipe, and it's basically like insurance. It's making sure that you have more fat molecules than you have the lye solution. And also what that can do is that means you're going to have extra oil fats in your soap, your final product, right? Which is kind of good, because then when you wash yourself, you're still going to have some of that oil on your skin, and it's going to be moisturizing. Another way to do that is to do what's called a lye discount. And basically you take a percentage of the lye and decrease it that much. So if you have a 5% lye discount, you would decrease your lye solution by that percentage. Okay, so I call it insurance for your soap making. It gives you the ability to fudge a little bit, but you're still safe. Your final product's still gonna be safe. It's not gonna end up caustic, and it's not gonna peel anybody's skin off, basically.
Make sure you write down what that percentage is, whichever process you're using, so that you have a repeatable process.
Right, so when you get to the point where you're starting to develop your own recipes for soap making, there's a lot of really good soap calculators out there. The one that I think is the most comprehensive is soapcalc.com. Might be .net, I'm not sure, but we'll share that link with you. But it is, if you just Google soap calc, it will come up as the first thing on there. Very comprehensive, and you can put in your percentages of fats and stuff like that, and it will tell you how much water and lye solution you need for that. And you can it has a section for super fatting in there, like what percentage of super fat do you want to use to give yourself, that insurance. It's really good. But for our situation in all these videos, we're going to give the recipe that we're using, and I highly recommend starting there before you delve into the world of percentages and developing your own recipes.
Yeah, I mean, people have been making lye soap for over 100 years. It's not new.
No.
It's a tried and true process, but we just want to make sure that everyone stays safe.
Right.
Wear your safety equipment. There's a particular order.
I know. I got new safety glasses for this whole thing. Yay.
Yeah,
nice.
so wear all your stuff.
Yes.
Make sure you don't hurt yourself, and that's
Right.
one of the things we want to make sure.
And that's just it. This is an introduction, right? We want to show you that it's not difficult. There are some things that are important that you need to remember about it, but it's not so difficult that it's impossible to do. And then once you start doing it, and if you enjoy it, the possibilities are endless. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, all the different ways you can make soap. And he's absolutely right. We've been doing it for hundreds of years, so it's not some new thing. It's not rocket science. But
it's science, just not rocket science.
It's definitely science.
We don't want the rocket part of that.
Right. And if you like science, it's quite fascinating, but I'm not going to try to go in there and explain it because I was not great at chemistry, so. But yeah, so that's the basics of it. I think next what we want to do is talk about molds. Is that right? Yeah. So I'm going to bring these back out here. And again, like I said, starting out, you can absolutely do this sort of process. This particular mold, Doug made it for me. Thanks, honey. It is adjustable. Is that right? Did I just do something wrong here? Sorry. It is an adjustable mold.
Don't turn the equipment.
And this one actually, I think, is that it's maxed out, but we can adjust these pieces here so that if we wanted a skinnier bar or something like that, if we adjust these pieces, we can turn these bolts in and make it smaller.
You just got to cut different end pieces.
Right, and then if you want to make it wider, then your base piece is going to be longer, and then you could buy longer bolts and kind of extend this board out to here, so you can make a, one big slab, what's called a slab of soap, and then just cut it up when you're done. We just went with this basic small mold because the particular recipe that we're going to use should fit really nicely in here when we get to that point. Was there anything that you wanted to add about this?
Yeah, so I already shot another video of how we built the mold, right? So I've got all the dimensions written down on the wood in the video so that people can see that, and we can put those dimensions in the description of the video so people know that. It really doesn't matter unless you're going to put this thing in the oven. It doesn't.
Don't do that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what this is made out of. It can be treated lumber or untreated lumber. It doesn't.
See, I know somebody who uses cedar posts or cedar fence posts to make hers.
But the reason, treated lumber is what's readily available in most hardware stores. The reason that it doesn't matter is because you're going to line that with
parchment paper. Which is another something that you need from soap making. Sorry.
Yeah, so you're going to line that mold, and when you pour, your soap's never going to touch or extract chemicals out of that wood, right. So you'll be okay.
Right. Fantastic. I think, unless you want me to go into more details about each of the fatty acids, we're kind of ready to move on to making the soap.
I think we should move on and make some soap.
Fantastic.
I like talking about things. I really do like talking about things, but I really like doing things too, so let's make some soap.
Fantastic. Let's do it. The thing we're going to do right now is put the liner in the mold so we have that ready to go before we even get started and don't possibly forget it later, okay? So we're going to take some parchment paper and take your mold upright first. And you're going to pull out enough to completely go past the ends, okay? Just want to make sure we've got enough, okay? The next thing you want to do is lay your mold on its side. I'm going to do it on this side because the hands are in the way. And you're going to take the paper, parchment paper, so it doesn't always want to play right. And you're going to line it up with the inside edge of your mold, okay? And then mark that. And then do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you're good. There we go. And then score that down. All right. Then I'm going to lift this up. Set this inside. See, I got it too long. Okay. Let's try this again. Just bring this thing in a bit. Looked like that was about right. There we go. There we go, much better. Okay, so you're going to set this inside. Make sure you've got enough excess up at the top here. And
Hold it back up. see the excess.
Okay. And then you're going to come inside and you're going to press it into the corners all the way. And then you're just going to score it kind of with your thumb so you know where that line is. Thumb or whatever fingers you've got. Okay. So now we've got this mark here that marks the inside of the mold. Okay. So now what we want to do is take this corner edge here and bring it up to that center fold. Okay. Press that down. And we need to cut off any excess that goes past this line. So I'm just going to trim that off. Okay. And we're going to do that on all 4 sides. And make sure you have decent scissors around. I'm going to trim off some of this up here because it's getting in the way of my other side. Same thing. And this fold up to the center here. Flatten it out. And your line. And last one. So it's giving me a little bit of a problem because I had that other line because I didn't get it quite right the first time. So it's kind of giving me fits a little bit. Okay. And now we have, ideally, perfect mold. Okay, so then we're going to touch this up a bit because we need to tape the excess down. So I'm just going to make a cut here on all the corners. I'm making a cut down, not all the way down, but just enough to where I can fold it over the edge of the mold. Scissors are giving me a hard time. Okay.
Lack of coffee.
The scissors need more coffee or I need more coffee?
Yes.
All right, so we're going to press that down nice and neat. And tape it in place. This down. Nice and neat. And mess up your tape. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be real smart. Ha-ha! I do need more coffee.
I told you.
Doesn't have to be all perfect and fantastic. I just want to keep that, want to keep it firm against all the edges so that your mold, your soap, the final product looks nice.
No creases, no wrinkles.
Right.
No bubbles.
You know. No. All right. Well, now that this is done, I'm going to go have some more coffee, and then we'll get started. And that's it. That's the easiest way I found to line your soap molds. So the first thing we want to do is get our fats ready. If you have any solid fats, we need to get those melted so they can mix with any liquid fats that you have in your recipe. And the end goal is to have the texture. The goal is to have the temperature at between 90 degrees and 110 before we combine them with the lye water. So remember that number for this particular recipe. So first thing I want to do is to measure out my solid fats. This one's in a bag. And for this recipe, I need, this is shea butter. I need 255 grams of that. Where's the opening? There it is. Ugh. This part can get a little messy. I'm going to throw this whole chunk in there because I think it's probably pretty close to what we need. 245. I didn't have quite enough of this, and that's fine. 49. Wait, if I get all the little bits out of the corners. 52. It's going to be real close. Ugh. 53. Maybe I should have done this first. Got some pieces over here. Sorry. 53. Still at 53. That's okay. That's fine. 53. And then pour that in your double boiler so it can start melting. And then move on to your next one. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. I got that all over my hands. Got some pieces that fell on the counter, so maybe those will help.
Bring it up to 255.
Right. Just need 1 more gram. Okay, and then the next is coconut oil, and I need 298 grams of that. So I'm just gonna spin that in until I get to 298.
And you're making up the difference in grams with this oil, with this fat.
No, because it's a different fat, right? So I'm still going to use the right amount. That's way over. That's fine. It's fine to have too much fat.
Yeah. Too much good.
Too much fat is fine. Okay. Now we get that in the double boiler. Let it start melting. And we're just going to sit here and babysit this until it melts. And then we'll come back and combine the olive oil with it and then check our temperature and see where we're at and see if we're between that 90 and 110. While that's melting, I'm going to go ahead and measure out my olive oil, and that is 298 grams for this recipe.
Another reason that plastic is good.
Yes. Just a little bit more. That's fine. For the fats, when you're measuring out the fats, you do want it to be as close as possible, but it's okay if you go over on the fats. Where it's not okay to go over or under is on the lye solution. We'll be discussing that next. Solid fats melted. I'm going to pull this off of the double boiler and pour in the, grab my whisk, and pour in the olive oil. And then we're going to check the temperature and see where we're at. Chances are we're going to be too hot. But that's fine. It gives us some time to work on our lye solution. So I'm just going to pour this in here and stir it up. Putting the room temperature olive oil in this hot mixture is going to help cool it down too. So that's good. Mix that up. And then check the temperature. This is why I want a digital infrared one. So it looks like we're at 135. Okay, and remember we need to be between 90 and 110. So we're gonna let this mixture sit here and cool off and move on to making our lye solution next. On the lye solution, and just a couple of things I want to point out because you are working with a caustic material. You want to be wearing your safety glasses. You want to be wearing a mask. We should all be familiar with masks these days, right? I wear a long sleeve shirt. Some people put like gloves over them. I'm just going to have nitrile gloves on. And also just to let you know, since we're doing this inside the house, we are turning on our vent fan. It's going to be pretty high, so I apologize if you can't hear very well. I won't be doing a ton of talking because I want to be able to focus on what I'm doing. But let me go grab some gloves and I'll be right back. Okay, got my gloves. We're good there. One other thing before we get started, before I turn that fan on, is I want to make sure you understand this. Never, ever, ever pour the water into the lye. Don't do it. It will cause it to bubble up, explode. Just don't. Always pour the lye into the water. And I'm going to say it several times so you don't forget. Please, it's very, very important in soap making. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is measure out the water. You want to go ahead and turn on the vent fan because we are going to be creating fumes here. Oh, no. Turn it back on. There you go. And 1, 2, or 3, whatever. Okay. So I cleared out the scale. I'm just going to pour in my water, and I need 227 grams. Too much? This you want to be very precise about. Oh, so close. Okay, 227 grams. Set that aside. And now we're going to measure out our lye. And for the lye, we need 119 grams. If you're lye has a bunch of big clumps in there, just shake it up to break them down. And 119 grams. I'm going to move this over because that makes me nervous. Okay, 119 grams. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to move this out of the way. So we have our lye measured out and we have our water measured out. Okay? What I say, never pour the water in the lye. Always pour the lye in the water. Okay? So we have our, this is going to be our lye solution mixture once we're done. It's got my water in it already. And I'm just going to gently, not fast. So what happens is when this lye gets in the water, creates a chemical reaction, and it gets really hot and it off-gases, okay? You'll probably be able to see the fumes from it. So I'm just stirring as I pour it in a little bit at a time. You'll see it get cloudy. That means it hasn't dissolved yet. See how it's getting cloudy? And I don't know, you might be able to see fumes coming off of it, you might not. I'm going to move this over a little closer to the vent fan. Science is fun. And I'm just going to keep going a little bit at a time. Until I get it all in there. See the fumes coming off of it? I don't know if you can get that. I can see the fumes, and when you're doing this, you'll be able to see the fumes too. I'm just going to keep going. Oh, got a big clump. There's a lot of fumes. That big clump fell in there. And if you have pets, it's a good idea to put them outside when you're doing this, or even better, do this outside. Ooh, I can feel the heat coming off of that. You also want to make sure that you're using heat-proof plastic. Mix this mixture in. We're almost done. We're just going to get the last of it in there. Make sure I get it all in there. Alright. I'm just going to keep stirring. Whew, that is hot. Just to give you an idea, the temperature in there right now, it's almost 200 degrees. Okay. So I'm just going to keep stirring. And eventually, as this mixture dissolves, it's going to be clear again, just like water. It's going to look just like water as it cools down and everything gets combined. I'm just going to keep stirring it for a little bit, and then I'm going to let it sit here. So if you remember, we have to get this down to between 90 and 110. You can either let it sit here on the counter and do that under the vent fan so the fumes can off-gas, or another option if you need to cool it down faster is to put it into an ice bath. So I think what I'll do is I'll set up an ice bath here and show y'all what that looks like, so we can get this down to temperature to be able to mix everything together. our oil mixture, is already down to about 112-ish. So I'm gonna set this lye solution in this ice bath and see if we can cool it off just a little bit faster. And all I did was took another bucket, put some ice and water in it. And I'm just gonna keep stirring it. I think I might have put too much ice in here. Let me put some more water in this ice bucket. There we go. Stirring it also helps it cool off faster. I've known some people that actually mix their lye solution the day before so that it can be at room temperature when they're getting ready to make soap. Since we want ours to be between 90 and 110, we just do it when we're making the soap. We're already down to 148. I'm actually going to stop this a few degrees above 110 just so we have some wiggle room in terms of getting everything together for mixing the lye mixture and the fat mixture. Okay, so at 113, I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. 112, so it's going to keep coming down as it sits there. And we're going to set ourselves up for combining everything together. So we'll be right back. Okay, so we're ready for the final part of this. We've got our fats. They're cooled to 107. The lye mixture is at 107. And then we've got our essential oils here to put in at the end. So we're going to start making soap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my Immersion Blender in here, and it's called burp it, make sure I get all the air bubbles out. And then I'm going to start pouring in the lye mixture. And you don't want to splash this, obviously. So first I'm just going to mix it. Okay, so we're just slowly pouring the lye mixture in here. I'm not using the blender just yet. I'm just using it to mix things together. And you can already see a change in color in the product. It's already starting to saponify. All right, so all of the lye mixture is in there. Get that out of the way. All right, still just mixing it.
by hand. And what we're looking for here is what's called trace. We discussed that briefly before, and I'm going to try my best. It's kind of hard to get it on video, but we're going to try really hard to get it. So now I'm just going to just short little bursts of the Immersion Blender. Not a lot at once, just a few seconds at a time, and we're just going to keep mixing. If you use the Immersion Blender too much, it's going to emulsify too quickly, and you're going to end up with a chunk of soap in there. Ask me how I know. So we're just going to keep going. We're looking for trace. Now what trace is when I lift this blender out of the mixture and the droplets fall on the top, it leaves a line or a pattern from where it fell. We are not there yet, so I'm just going to keep going. Now you can certainly do this without the Immersion Blender. Do it by hand and just keep stirring until you get there. It just takes longer. And that's not a big deal. If you have time to sit here and stir it for 30 minutes, that's fine too. And you want to keep that blender under the surface because you don't want it to be incorporating a bunch of air bubbles into your soap. And you just want to run it at little spurts. Let's see. Nope, not yet. And you'll feel the mixture starting to thicken up. And that's how you know you're on the right path. There it goes. See how much thicker it is now? That's great. We're getting there.
You mix in your essential oil after trace?
I could do it now or I could do it after trace. I'm going to wait till I get to trace. Okay, we're getting really close here, guys. Don't get too excited, though. Start running that Immersion Blender too fast and you'll be stuck. And if you do run it too fast and your soap solidifies, you can do what's called rebatching. I have not done that, but you basically melt that soap down and then rework it or add it to another recipe. We're going to get this to what's called a light trace. So the lines that it makes when it drips on is not going to be super thick. It's just going to be thin lines. If you wanted to be able to do designs in your soap after you put it in the mold, you want to get to a thicker trace. It just kind of depends on your preference. I just get really nervous about over mixing it. Because I've done that and it sucks. Okay, we're starting to get to a light trace. I don't know if he's going to be able to get that on video, but you can kind of see the lines left over after it drips on there. So I'm going to go just a little bit more. See those lines that it's creating? Are you able to get those on there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm happy with that. I'm actually going to move now to my whisk. Back to my whisk. And mix in the essential oils. So this was 35 grams. We're using sandalwood in ours. But you can use whatever oil you prefer or a combination of oils or whatnot. All right, and we are ready to pour. All right, so the next thing we're going to do now is pour it into our mold. And this is the cool thing about using plastic containers. Is that you can easily pour the soap in. I'm just going to scrape out what we've got down here. Now, if you had taken it to a thicker trace, you could do little designs on the top, squigglies or spoon scoops and stuff like that, and get real creative with it.
Put the herbs in it.
Well, we could still put, you know, herbs, lavender buds or whatever on the top if we wanted to in this particular case. But I personally just prefer mine to be flat. So make sure you're good here. Got a little scoop on the side there. Okay. And that's great. So what we're going to do next is we're going to cover this with a piece of cardboard. And then we're going to wrap it up into a towel. Okay, so we've got our soap in the mold here. So now what we're going to do is we need to wrap it up to assist the chemical reaction that's happening in there to get the soap through the gel form and then into its solid form. So it's going to gel up and then it's going to solidify. So what we're going to do is set this on a towel very gently. And it's going to get warm and expand in this process as well. So you want to make sure in your molds that you have plenty of room between the soap and the top of the mold so it doesn't bubble over. And then we're just putting a piece of cardboard over the top, just make sure nothing gets in there. And then we're going to wrap it up with a towel and set it aside for 12 to 24 hours. And that's it. And we'll be back when it's ready to unmold and cut. I'm going to talk about cleanup. And there's two different ways, two schools of thoughts on cleanup. One is you can take a big like dish pan and fill it with vinegar, because this soap that's on the side here is still caustic, right? So it can still burn your hands, it's burn your skin. So we don't want to be touching that, and we don't want to put it down our drain because obviously you don't want that in your septic system or whatnot. So what some people suggest you do is you get a big tub, you fill it with vinegar and water so that it makes that, it's not caustic, but it's inert at that point, right? It's no
neutralizes
longer, it neutralizes it, thank you. So that it's not a problem going down in your drain. What I like to do is, the reality is that we just made soap, right? So it just takes a few days for it to no longer be caustic. So I just put all of the stuff in the biggest bucket here that I had. So this is all the stuff that we used in our process. I'm just going to set everything in there. And I'm going to set it off to the side. And I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it for a couple of days. I'm going to let that soap continue to form into actual soap so that's no longer caustic. And then I'm just going to fill the bucket up with water
and wash everything in there with the soap that I just made. So much easier. Just set it off to the side, let it do its thing for a couple of days, and then come back and wash up all your tools. And that's it.